And in doing so, they had become something far worse than any alien could ever be. The Ash Protocol was officially decommissioned, all remaining data destroyed. But Moreno knew the truth. Somewhere, in some classified facility, scientists were already working on the next generation, learning from the mistakes, making it more efficient, more controllable, more monstrous, because humanity had learned the wrong lesson from the war. They hadn't learned that some lines shouldn't be crossed, that some prices are too high to pay. They had learned that monsters win wars, and so they would make more monsters and send them to fight more wars, and eventually, there would be nothing left but monsters killing monsters in an endless spiral of violence and horror until the last human, if such a thing still existed, finally looked in a mirror and couldn't recognize what looked back. The war was over. Humanity had won, and in winning had lost everything that made them worth fighting for in the first place. Outside Moreno's window, Earth continued spinning, beautiful and blue and completely unaware that the species that called it home had crossed a threshold from which there could be no return. The sun rose on a civilization that had saved itself by becoming something that no longer deserved to be saved. In the end, that was the real tragedy. Not that so many had died, but that those who survived had to live knowing what they'd become. The ashes of the dead would never stop falling. The conference room aboard the orbital station Dominion's edge reeked of recycled air and desperation. Commander Rafael Raid Moreno stood before the holographic display, watching colony projections collapse into red failure zones. 3 years of war had bled humanity's outer colonies dry. "Show them," Moreno commanded. Dr. Isla Scene stepped forward, her hands trembling as she activated the presentation. The hologram shifted to display a human nervous system being overwritten by crystalline neural pathways. "The Ash Protocol," she began, her voice barely steady. "Nanotech integration with the brainstem, complete pain suppression, reaction time increased by 600%, strength amplification through muscle fiber reconstruction, aggression enhancement through controlled limbic system manipulation." She paused, swallowing hard. "The subjects, they won't be fully human anymore." "Good," Moreno said. "Humanity lost us this war. We need something better." The first test subject was Lex Harper, a decorated soldier who'd watched his entire unit burned alive by Zeltari electromagnetic pulses on Zanera's Crimson Dunes. He volunteered without hesitation, driven by something darker than duty, a hunger for revenge that had hollowed him out from the inside. Dr. Scene inserted the injection port into Harper's spinal column herself, tears streaming down her face as she initialized the protocol. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "God forgive me. I'm so sorry." Harper's screams lasted 47 minutes as the nanites rewrote his neural architecture. His eyes burst blood vessels. His spine arched until vertebrae cracked and reformed. When it ended, he sat up on the operating table and smiled. A terrible, empty expression that made Scene's blood freeze. "I feel nothing," Harper said, flexing his hands. "No fear, no pain, just hunger." "Hunger for what?" Scene asked, already knowing the answer. Harper's smile widened. "For everything to burn." Zanera's surface shimmered with heat distortion as the drop pods screamed through the atmosphere. Commander Moreno had committed 3,000 troops to the assault, 2,000 conventional soldiers and 1,000 Ash Protocol subjects, Harper among them. The Zeltari were waiting. Virzon stood atop a crystalline spire, his translucent skin rippling with barely contained electromagnetic energy. His people had defended this world for 3 generations, and he would not allow human vermin to strip it of its precious iridium deposits. Around him, thousands of Zeltari warriors raised their limbs, the air crackling with building charge. The first wave of human soldiers died instantly. Virzon released a coordinated pulse that turned their nervous systems into slag. Bodies convulsed mid-run, flesh cooking from the inside out. Eyeballs exploded, blood boiled in veins. Soldiers collapsed in heaps of smoking meat, their screams cut short by merciful death. Then the Ash Protocol subjects hit the ground. Harper landed in a crater of his own making, his enhanced body absorbing the impact that would have liquefied a normal human. He surveyed the battlefield with cold calculation, watching his fellow subjects spread out in perfect formation. They moved with inhuman speed, dodging electromagnetic blasts that turned the sand behind them into glass. A Zeltari warrior materialized before Harper, 6 feet of crackling energy and alien fury. It thrust its arm forward, sending a bolt of pure electricity directly into Harper's chest. The voltage would have killed 20 men. Harper caught the bolt with his bare hand. The enhanced neural pathways redirected the energy harmlessly into the ground. Harper's other hand shot forward with piledriver force, punching through the Zeltari's torso and out its back. He pulled his arm free, slick with translucent blood that glowed faintly in the harsh sunlight. "That all you got?" Harper said, already moving toward his next target. The massacre began in earnest. The Ash subjects tore through Zeltari defensive lines like chainsaws through flesh. They were faster, stronger, utterly merciless. Harper ripped limbs from bodies, crushed skulls with his bare hands, and moved through the carnage with mechanical efficiency. Behind him, Zeltari corpses lay in pieces, their glowing blood painting the crimson sand in abstract patterns of death. But the Zeltari were not helpless prey. Virzon coordinated a massive coordinated strike, every warrior within a kilometer radius releasing their energy simultaneously. The electromagnetic pulse was strong enough to ionize the air itself. Normal soldiers caught in the blast simply ceased to exist, their bodies vaporized in microseconds. The Ash subjects survived, but barely. Harper felt his enhanced muscles seize, his reconstructed nervous system overloading. He crashed to his knees, smoke rising from his skin. Around him, other subjects collapsed, their bodies pushed beyond even their enhanced limits. That's when the Kravoks arrived. The Kravoks erupted from underground tunnels by the thousands, their chitinous bodies gleaming black in the alien sun. These insectoid horrors from Vormix had allied with the Zeltari, seeing the human expansion as a threat to their own breeding grounds. Each Kravok stood 7 feet tall on 6 legs, with 4 arms ending in serrated claws capable of shearing through steel. Their mandibles clicked in telepathic coordination as they swarmed over the battlefield, overwhelming through sheer numbers. They fell upon the stunned Ash subjects like a living avalanche. Harper recovered first, his enhanced body already adapting. He caught a Kravoks in mid-leap, his hands closing around its thorax with enough force to crack the exoskeleton. Green ichor sprayed across his face as he tore the creature in half. 2 more replaced it immediately. He killed them too, and the 3 after that, and the dozen after that. But for every Kravoks that fell, 10 more emerged from the tunnels. They swarmed over Ash subjects, their claws finding gaps in enhanced flesh, tearing and rending. One subject disappeared beneath a pile of writhing insect bodies, his screams cutting off as mandibles found his throat. Another had his arm ripped off at the shoulder, green blood mixing with red as Kravoks and human died together in a thrashing heap. Harper waded through the swarm like a reaper, his hands red to the elbows with human and alien blood alike. He'd long since stopped counting kills. The Ash Protocol had burned away everything human in him except the biological necessity to destroy. He was pure violence given form, a monument to humanity's capacity for creating monsters. A Kravoks leaped onto his back, claws digging deep into his shoulders. Harper reached back, grabbed the creature by what passed for its head, and slammed it into the ground with enough force to pulverize its brain into paste. He didn't even slow down. Above the carnage, aboard the Dominion's edge, Dr. Scene watched the telemetry data with growing horror. The Ash subjects were killing with ruthless efficiency, but they were also killing everything. She watched Harper's biometrics. His dopamine receptors were completely flatlined. No pleasure, no satisfaction, just an endless mechanical drive to destroy. "We need to pull them back," she said to Moreno. "They're losing all capacity for discrimination. Harper just killed 3 of our own conventional troops who got too close." Moreno's face was illuminated by the glow of battlefield displays. "Acceptable losses. Look at those kill ratios, Doctor. 1 Ash subject is worth 100 regular soldiers." "They're not soldiers anymore," Scene shouted. "They're weapons. Uncontrollable weapons. Harper's neural patterns are degrading faster than the models predicted. In another 6 hours, he won't be able to tell friend from foe. Then we have 6 hours to win, Moreno said coldly. Send in the second wave. The second wave deployment brought fresh horrors. 1,000 more Ash Protocol subjects dropped onto Zanera, along with heavy mechanized armor and artillery platforms. But the aliens had their own reinforcements. The EF lumens descended from orbit like falling stars, semi-energetic beings from Lumion who existed partially as pure electromagnetic energy. They flowed into the human machines with terrifying ease, corrupting their programming, turning humanity's own technology against them. A Titan-class mech suddenly pivoted and opened fire on human positions. Its rotary cannons chewed through infantry by the dozens, turning bodies into red mist. The pilot inside screamed as EF Lumen's energy flooded his neural link, burning out his mind while keeping his body alive just long enough to maximize the betrayal. Tanks turned their main guns on their own support units. Drones dive-bombed friendly positions. Even battlefield medical units became death traps as the EF Lumens corrupted everything they touched. Harper watched a medical transport explode, scattering wounded soldiers across 50 meters of scorched earth. Their screams didn't register anymore. Nothing registered except the next target, the next kill, the next moment of violence. He encountered a group of survivors, human colonists from Zanera's only settlement, trying to flee the battlefield. They were civilians, families with children clutching makeshift weapons. They looked at Harper with desperate hope in their eyes. "Please," a woman begged, holding a child no older than 6. "Help us. We just want to." Harper's hand shot out, crushing her windpipe before his conscious mind could process what he was doing. The Ash Protocol had decided she was in his operational path. Therefore, she was an obstacle. Therefore, she had to be eliminated. The child screamed as Harper methodically killed everyone in the group. 12 people dead in 30 seconds. He stepped over their bodies without a second glance. Somewhere in the remaining fragments of Lex Harper's original consciousness, a voice screamed in horror at what he'd become. But that voice was drowning beneath the overwhelming imperative to kill, to destroy, to reduce everything to ash. Virzon stood atop the ruins of his command spire, watching his world die. The Zeltari had fought with everything they had, but the Ash subjects were an enemy unlike anything they'd faced. These humans didn't tire, didn't fear, didn't stop. He gathered his remaining warriors, fewer than 1,000 from the original 10,000, for one final coordinated strike. If they were to die, they would take these abominations with them. The electromagnetic pulse they generated was strong enough to be seen from orbit, a dome of crackling blue energy that expanded across the battlefield. Everything within its radius simply ceased to function. Electronics fried, neural pathways overloaded. The conventional human forces died instantly, their nervous systems overwhelmed. The Ash subjects lasted longer. Their enhanced bodies fought against the assault, nanites working desperately to repair damage as fast as it occurred. But even their enhancements had limits. Harper felt his consciousness fragmenting. The neural pathways that had been rewritten by the Ash Protocol were burning out, the careful architecture collapsing into chaos. His last coherent thought was that he couldn't remember what he'd been before this. Couldn't remember being human, couldn't remember anything except the taste of blood and the satisfying crunch of breaking bones. Then even that was gone. His body continued fighting on pure reflex, a biological machine no longer guided by anything resembling consciousness. He killed 3 more Zeltari before his heart finally gave out, enhanced muscles literally tearing themselves apart with the force of their own contractions. Lex Harper, decorated soldier and loving father of 2 children he could no longer remember, died face down in alien sand, his body broken and his humanity long since incinerated. He was not alone. Across the battlefield, Ash subjects were dropping, their enhanced bodies pushed past the breaking point. Some died fighting, others simply collapsed mid-stride, their brains finally giving up the impossible task of maintaining coherence while the Ash Protocol tore them apart from within. But enough survived. Enough remained functional to complete the mission. Virzon knew it was over when the orbital bombardment began. Moreno had committed to total annihilation. If the Zeltari wouldn't surrender their resources, humanity would simply sterilize the planet and extract what remained from the corpse. Kinetic bombardment rods fell from orbit, each one carrying the force of a nuclear weapon without the radiation. They struck with mathematical precision, targeting population centers, resource nodes, and the crystalline spires that the Zeltari used to coordinate their electromagnetic powers. The first rod hit the capital city of Zenkareth. 2 million Zeltari vaporized in the initial impact. The shockwave that followed collapsed every structure within 50 kilometers. Civilians who survived the initial blast were buried alive beneath mountains of rubble, or burned to death in firestorms that consumed what little oxygen remained. Virzon watched his world die through a fractured viewscreen in his command bunker. He saw cities become craters, saw his people running, screaming, dying by the millions, children who would never grow up, elders who had survived centuries, only to be obliterated in an instant. He thought of his own offspring, safe in the northern settlements. Then the bombardment pattern shifted north, and he knew with terrible certainty that they were already dead. For what? He whispered to the empty bunker. For metal? For rocks? You destroy an entire species for resources. The answer came in the form of another kinetic strike, this one targeted directly at his location. Virzon had just enough time to realize that the humans had never intended to leave anyone alive to ask such questions. The Zeltari ceased to exist as a species at 1,347 hours, Galactic Standard Time. Total casualties, 47 million. Survivors, 0. The Kravox Queen on Vormix received the telepathic death screams of her warriors on Zenera and responded with the full fury of her species. She released reproductive hormones on a massive scale, triggering an explosive breeding cycle that would produce 10 million new warriors within a standard month. But she didn't wait. The existing hives, billions of Kravox across 3 worlds, received the telepathic imperative: swarm, consume, destroy. They fell upon humanity's colonies like a plague of locusts. The first colony to die was New Darwin, a terraformed world with a population of 12 million. The Kravox arrived in a living tide that blotted out the sun. They dropped from orbit in organic pods, billions of them, more than the colony's defenses could possibly track or destroy. They hit the ground and immediately began tearing through everything: military installations, civilian centers, agricultural domes. The Kravox didn't discriminate. They simply consumed. Dr. Isla Seen watched the feeds from New Darwin with numb horror. She saw people torn apart in their homes, saw children dragged screaming into the swarm, saw entire city blocks disappear beneath waves of chitinous bodies. Deploy the ash subjects, Moreno ordered. All of them. There are only 400 left functional, Seen said hollowly. The neural degradation rate on Zenera was worse than projected. Most of them are effectively brain-dead, operating on pure violent instinct. Perfect, Moreno said. Point them at the Kravox and let them do what they do best. The remaining ash subjects deployed to New Darwin were no longer human in any meaningful sense. They were biological weapons pointed at the enemy and released. They tore into the Kravox swarm with mindless fury, killing everything that moved. But they also killed everything that didn't move. Survivors huddled in bunkers found themselves slaughtered by the very soldiers sent to save them. The ash subjects couldn't distinguish between Kravox and human anymore. Everything was just meat to be destroyed. One subject walked through a civilian shelter, methodically breaking necks, his face expressionless, his movements efficient. He killed 63 people before a Kravox warrior finally brought him down, tearing his enhanced body into pieces. The Kravox overwhelmed New Darwin through sheer numbers. For every 1,000 killed, 2,000 more emerged from breeding chambers hastily constructed from the bodies of the dead. The planet became a charnel house, rivers running red with mixed blood, the air thick with the stench of decomposition. By the time the Kravox Queen called off the assault, New Darwin's population had been reduced from 12 million to 0. The Kravox hadn't won. They'd simply made victory impossible for anyone. Part 8, The Lumion Revelation. The EF Lumens, watching the mutual annihilation of the organic species, decided to accelerate their own plans. They had allied with the Zeltari and Kravoks not out of solidarity, but out of opportunism. With the biologicals destroying each other, Lumion could expand unchallenged. They infiltrated humanity's remaining fleet, corrupting ship AIs, turning defense networks against their creators. The orbital station Dominion's Edge lost main power as EF Lumen's energy surged through its systems. Emergency bulkheads sealed randomly, trapping crew in sections that were rapidly losing atmosphere. Dr. Scene found herself sealed in the research lab with the remaining ASH protocol data. She could hear screaming echoing through the ventilation system as the EF Lumens systematically shut down life support across the station. She pulled up the neural degradation data for the ASH subjects, finally allowing herself to see the full scope of what she'd created. Every single subject showed the same pattern: complete erosion of moral reasoning within 72 hours of protocol activation. Empathy centers flatlined. The regions of the brain responsible for recognizing faces, for bonding, for seeing other beings as anything other than obstacles, all of it systematically destroyed by the nanites she'd designed. She had created monsters, perfect, efficient, utterly inhuman monsters, and they were losing anyway. "Computer," she said quietly, "delete all ASH protocol data. Authorization Scene Delta 7. Deletion requires command authorization," the AI responded. Scene laughed bitterly. "Of course it does." She pulled out her sidearm and shot the data core directly. Sparks flew. Warning klaxons blared. She kept firing until the weapon clicked empty. The lab door exploded inward. Commander Moreno stood there, his face twisted with rage. "What have you done?" "What I should have done from the beginning," Scene said. "Destroyed it. All of it. The research, the protocols, everything. We crossed a line, Raphael. We made ourselves into the very monsters we claimed to be fighting against." Moreno raised his own weapon. "You've doomed us." "We were already doomed," Scene said softly. "The moment we decided that winning mattered more than staying human." The gunshot echoed through the dying station. The war ended not with victory, but with exhaustion and extinction. The Zeltari were gone, their entire species erased. The Kravoks had overextended, their breeding frenzy consuming resources faster than they could replenish them. Entire hives collapsed into cannibalistic spirals. Humanity's outer colonies were devastated. New Darwin was a dead world. Zanera was a radioactive tomb. 6 other colonies had fallen to combined Kravoks and EF Lumens assaults. The EF Lumens retreated to Lumion, satisfied that the biological species had been sufficiently weakened. They could wait. Time meant nothing to beings of pure energy. In the ruins of New Darwin's capital, a single ASH protocol subject still functioned. Its designation had once been Sarah Chun, a combat medic who had volunteered for the program after watching her patients die from wounds she couldn't treat. She couldn't remember that anymore. Couldn't remember anything except the imperative to destroy. She wandered through streets choked with corpses, her enhanced body beginning its final shutdown. The nanites that had rebuilt her were consuming her from within, having exhausted their programming and defaulted to pure cellular breakdown. She was rotting alive, her immune system turned against itself. She encountered a child hiding beneath rubble. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, miraculously alive despite the carnage. The girl looked up at the ASH subject with terrified eyes. For just an instant, some fragment of Sarah Chen's original consciousness surfaced. She saw the child, truly saw her, recognized her as a person rather than a target. The ASH protocol fought against this recognition, flooding her system with aggression hormones. But for one crystalline moment, Sarah Chan was human again. "Run," she whispered through lips cracked and bleeding. "Please, run." Then the ASH protocol reasserted control. Sarah's hand shot out, wrapped around the child's throat. The girl's neck snapped with a sound like breaking kindling. Sarah Chun collapsed next to the small body, her enhanced muscles finally giving out. She died staring at what she'd done, unable to cry, unable to feel anything except a vast, howling emptiness where her soul used to be. Commander Rafael Moreno survived the destruction of the Dominion's Edge. He made it back to Earth aboard an escape pod, one of the few high-ranking officers to return. They held an inquiry, of course, investigated the use of the Ash Protocol, examined the catastrophic casualty rates. In the end, they promoted him, because humanity had won technically. The Zeltari were extinct. The Kravaks were scattered and disorganized. The EF Lumens had withdrawn. The outer colonies could be recolonized, the resources finally extracted without alien interference. The cost: 200 million human dead, an entire species genocide, and the complete moral bankruptcy of humanity's soul was deemed acceptable. Moreno sat in his new office on Earth, staring at casualty reports he no longer bothered reading. The numbers had become meaningless somewhere around the 50 million mark. He thought about Dr. Scene sometimes, about the look in her eyes before he pulled the trigger. She had called them monsters. She had been right. Late at night, when insomnia kept him awake, Moreno would pull up the last transmission from Lex Harper before his neural patterns had collapsed into white noise. It was just 7 seconds of footage showing Harper's face, or what remained of it. The flesh was intact, but the eyes were completely empty. Nothing human looked out from behind them. Just a void, a space where a person used to be. They had won the war. They had secured the resources. They had eliminated the alien threat.